session. Welcome to re-entry to the 2021 school year, strategies and schools for supporting English learners. This is the fourth and final part of our summer series for EL coordinators. This is going to focus on using multiple sources of data to support English learner students and programs. My name is Jennifer Norton. I'm the manager of English Learner Supports, part of a team of 3 in the Office of Multilingual Education within the Division of Teaching Learning. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Anika Harris. Please introduce yourself and say hello.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Anika Harris, English Language Acquisition PD Specialist. It's nice to be with you here this morning.
And our third member of the team, Santiago Santos, is not here today, but hopefully you have met him through some other sessions we've had or through attending his work on supporting dual language programs here in PC. And we are so glad that you're here with us today and looking forward to working together. For our brief time together this morning, we have a few agreements and practices that we'd like to put in place. We are, here to work together, focus on solutions, and focus on what is going to be best for students. So as we discussed, let's keep that in mind. And also to strive for equity of voice and monitor airtime. So we really want to hear from you. If you feel normally shy speaking up, please take advantage of the chat box or take yourself off mute so that we can hear your voice. And if you're often very outgoing, please just monitor that and know that we want to make sure everyone has a chance to speak. As we work through in breakout groups especially, just try to generate and iterate on as many solutions as you can. And know that we only have about 90 minutes today, so there's only so much we can achieve in a brief amount of time. So please be ready to accept non-closure and know that there will be much more work to be done, certainly afterwards. And we'll invite your input through a survey at the end of the session. And it's very helpful for us to hear from you about what supports you would like to see from us in the future and how we can support you in your work. As we are all kind of on this virtual platform together, we hope you'll do your best to participate, stay engaged. If you're not speaking, please do stay on mute. That's the little microphone-y button with the line through it. And also remember to take yourself off mute so that we can hear you. Otherwise, we won't know that you're talking. And to get used to using Teams, I just want to make sure to orient everyone to some of the features of this platform. So there's a little video button here, and you don't have to put that on, but in breakout groups that, sometimes is more helpful for interacting with your teammates. Again, just unmute when speaking. We really do want to hear from you. And when you're in the breakout, you will have one person who's a note taker, and that person will likely need to share their screen so everyone can see. And there will also be opportunities for sharing. So if you have a tool or an example of something that you have in your, on your laptop and want to share with others, you can feel free to share your screen as well. So that's the little arrow button here. And then raise and lower hand. Anika and I are going to be, keeping an eye on the participant list. So if you see next to your name, if you see the little hand button here, you can click that to raise your hand. And so we'll be watching. So, if we see that, we'll call on you. And then when you're done, we'll lower your hand for you. Okay. And let's just use the chat box a little bit now. So you're going to click on the little kind of word box icon. And if you haven't already done so, please enter your name and your school or local education agency, or as we say, LEA. This is like a double check for attendance, and just great to say hello to everyone. I see lots of folks have already posted. So please go ahead and take a moment to do that now. Great, I see names coming through. So hi Dominique, hi Elena, hi Leandra, hi Peter, hi Erin, Rachel. Okay. Michelle, wonderful. Okay, great to see everybody. Hi, Letty. All right, thanks everybody for being, here and being part of this. Hi, Anna. Okay, great. Now we're going to warm up using Nearpod, and in fact, we're going to switch to Nearpod now so that we can have a chance to try out this different type of experience doing virtual sessions. And Anika has kindly put a link into the chat box. So I'm going to ask if you can please click that. And then you should be able to access Nearpod. So I see Ellie's there, Leandra's there. If you have any issues or questions, just put that in the chat box or take yourself off mute to ask so we can support you with this transition. Okay, awesome. I see lots of people are there. Cool. All right, and I am going to share wow. Just transition. Okay, give everyone one more second. If anyone's having any issues, just let us know, but we hope that you're there and able to see. So for our warm-up today, we're going to be talking about data, right? So we would like to know what data are most useful to you in understanding your English learner students' language proficiency and what they need from you. So take a moment to just think about that. What are the data that are most helpful in understanding where they are in their English language proficiency and what they need from you next as their teacher? So think about that, and then I'm going to advance here and you should see a question, this question at the top of the page, and a space to answer. So when you're ready, enter your answer, and we should also be able to see other people's answers. Okay, so you will enter your answer and then click the submit button when you are done. And we should start to see everyone's answers coming up. Okay. So we see answers coming in one at a time. I see access scores, reading levels, RIT, ELP, access scores, other test scores, WIDA data, open-ended assessments that reflect the 4 language domains, map data. Great. It's great to see such a wide range of sources. WIDA levels. Yep. Observing conversations that English learners have. Updated access scores and EL screener scores, ELP levels. Great. Thanks everybody for sharing all of these answers. Okay, you should see them coming across the screen now. All right, great. All right, and I see some notes in the chat too. Everyone make sure you've got the Nearpod link so you can be in the same place with everybody else. So all of these answers are really useful for us as we start to think about, what do we have and how are we going to use it this year, right? And what I noticed in the answers is that there's a lot of focus on ELP scores from Access or Screener, and that you also have other sources of data that help you to understand where are students and where do they need to go next. So for our session today, we're going to look at, and I have a content and language objective just to try to have both content and language goals reflected here in our work today, to identify and evaluate data sources for developing English language proficiency goals, and to discuss ways to assess growth during the school year. And we're going to look at 4 different tools today, and you'll have access to all of them, as well as other tools that we won't be able to cover during our time together, but we'll look at a sample EL plan, a sample organizer for discussing individual EL student data, a sample EL progress monitoring tool, and a sample content and language rubric for assessing and monitoring progress with a language lens. And we're going to keep this conversation very focused on the here and now for fall 2020, knowing that this is a unique time and with the need for really thoughtful and student-centered solutions. So here are our foundational principles again, and you see we've gone through the first 3 in our previous sessions, and here we are today at session 4. And again, as we continue to develop sessions for the future, we'll want to dig deeper and deeper into each of these as time goes on. So we'll keep coming back to that. And then you can see the alignment between the principles and also the guiding principles for continuous education that OSSI has developed. You'll have the links for this in the presentation. If you have not read these already, they're very useful for setting that target for excellence for what is important, what needs to be the focus for this school year. And for today's session, we're focusing in on this part of the bullet point here. So here we have a very simple, but I think powerful visual to describe the instruction and assessment cycle. We set or adjust goals based on data, depending where you are in the cycle. Then you teach. Based on that, you assess whether the students achieved what you had intended or learned what the objective was, or if there is a need to adjust the teaching, adjust the goals. And then you can think of this cycle as something that can occur within a lesson on a daily basis. It could occur weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annually. So you can have different kind of zoom level of how you think about your work and setting those goals, teaching, assessing, and then adjusting based on what you learn from the assessment. And the key piece of this cycle would be to continually learn from what your students are showing you so that you can refine and support and continue to move forward in a systematic way. And we're going to start here now with the focusing on setting the goals. Okay, so we're going to do another interaction in Nearpod. And for this one, which you'll have the chance to respond in a moment, let's read this statement, okay? And think about, do you agree or disagree with the statement below? And be ready to explain why in your answer. So this is from CCSSO's guidance that was released very recently. It will be key for curriculum and instruction to be focused on moving students forward through grade level content and designed to minimize the need for extensive remediation prior to commencing with grade level instruction. Okay, so think about it for a second. And then when you respond, you can, and here's just a sample with visual for sentence starter. I agree because, or I disagree because. Okay. So now you should see a yellow screen that repeats the question and the quote. And at the bottom, there is a space for you to share your thoughts. And then it's going to be posted on a kind of like a pin board where everyone will be able to see one another's answers all together. So please take a moment to go ahead and write down your thoughts, and they should be popping up soon for everyone to see. And if you see something that you agree with, you can give it a click to like it. Great, and I'm starting to see a range of answers and thoughts. Yep, keep it coming. And then, you know, as people are responding, read what others say. And if you see a point that you would like to echo, you know, give that a click to like it. Yep. So I'm seeing just a range of thoughts, and you know, I'd love to hear if anyone would like to take themselves off of mute and just share a little bit more. It'd be great to hear your thoughts, because this is a really deep question, right? We know that we need students to access grade level content, even if they're not necessarily in their language proficiency, reading, speaking, listening, or writing at that level, right? But how do we kind of address the fact that there was a lot of time lost this past school year? And I think this is a key question that people are grappling with in terms of ensuring that students are moving forward, and that we're not sort of stuck in last year or focused on kind of making up for something that when we need to move forward. So I see a lot of great comments here. There's not enough time for remediation. We need to scaffold, but then we also see what remediation is key so students can access grade level instruction, right? And yeah, there's this tension, like there's different ways of looking at it depending on where students are, where they are in literacy in their home language. There's a lot of factors here. But ultimately, we need to work to see every student where they are and find a way to provide the access and essentially make that content accessible, focus on what needs to be learned now, and find ways to move forward in that. Great. So many great comments. Please do use the hand raise button or take yourself off mute if you'd like to contribute. Just feel free to chime in here.
Hi, this is Bobby Vertigal from Cardozo Education Campus in DCPS. I just want to point out that I know this is the wording that's going out for all teachers at this time, but I think as instructors of ELs or working with instructors of ELs, we're at a little bit of an advantage in this arena because we are already used to this. We're already dealing with recent immigrants that have interruptions of formal education. So in some ways, we already have the skill set to address this ask of delivering content without the remediation piece in a way that many of our colleagues who don't have that experience working with SLIFE students, I think it just puts us in a unique position that this is kind of business as usual for a lot of us.
That's a great point, Bobby. And as you were speaking, it just made me think of the collaboration opportunities that it raises. And I'm curious, does anyone have additional thoughts or would like to respond or add on to Bobby's point?
I think that this could be a really good time to kind of not necessarily reevaluate the whole aspect of education and standards, but thinking, you know, there was a lot of loss last year. There could potentially still be ongoing loss this year. Really thinking about in our curriculum instruction, like what are, and that's what standards are for, right? But what do students really need to grasp that they can more or less use in the future, right? I think there's a lot of things that we're studying in school, which is great information and is good for a test, but are you actually going to use it in your day-to-day post-schooling? And at my job earlier, we were just talking kind of like about social emotional and how we need to add that more into our daily interactions with students. And so now I just kind of wonder, like, are districts really going to reevaluate potentially the content that there may up that we're going to be doing is real? And before we can move forward, we have to make sure that they've obtained what they need to so they can move forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really does raise the question of what is important to teach, and then also what is important to assess, right? And how do we think about education completely differently in this environment? Okay, floor is open for anyone to add on or share a new idea. Okay, I'll give a little more wait time and then we can go on.
And I do want to make one more comment. I do know that you know, each state can have their own education policies or whatnot, but from teacher friends I've known that are around the country, some were kept pushing through on content, some stopped, some just act like school is over in March. And so I also think that before we push to keep moving forward, making sure identifying where students are and where their learning stops.
Mm-hmm.
Because depending on the county, depending on the state, some were going 40 hours a week and others were going maybe an hour a week. So it's like, where are students at right now before we can start pushing them forward?
Mm-hmm. Great point. And I think that's a great segue as we kind of move on and try to think about how do we tackle this task, right? So just to kind of frame where we are, there are, let's say, 3 sort of levels or types of assessments, right? So we've got summative, which would be access, PARC, there's end of unit test or your annual summative test. These are addressing longer term goals. Some of these data are available, some are not. And we have kind of at the other kind of end of the spectrum when we think of like those daily, weekly, regular cycles of teaching, learning, and assessing, formative assessment, where, you know, in the moment of your lessons, you are asking for and observing and seeing that just-in-time feedback, and you're responding even in the moment as you teach to address what students need at that moment. And it also is a bit of sampling that you're doing from your current lesson or from your current unit to try to understand where students are and how to adjust. Okay, and so as we discussed, we're going to focus a lot more on using formative assessment as an approach, particularly for this environment. And then also there's those interim or benchmark assessments that maybe are a little bit more of a periodic snapshot, but allow you to have an understanding of where students are. And sometimes this can be done across classrooms or for an entire grade level, let's say, right? And, you know, summative, there, like I said, there may be data that you have, but we know at the beginning of the school year, the main objective is not to be, you know, giving lots of long formal tests at this point, right? There are a lot of other elements to focus on. Of course, just the return to school, the creating of community relationships, and focusing on social emotional learning and well-being and safety in a way that is just feels very, very present for everyone right now. But as we discussed today, we're going to try to focus on what are the opportunities for assessment in a kind of embedded, formative, or maybe interim way that can allow you to understand where students are without layering on a test per se. I'm also sharing here the some recommendations for fall 2020 that were just released from CCSSO. It's the Chief Council of State Superintendent Officers. I think that's the right, almost right acronym. So take a second just to read these through, and I will kind of pull out highlights. Okay, so for assessment, they're saying, you know, you want to focus your teaching and learning on essential grade level content as quickly as possible. Thin and lean on assessment, again, focused on essentials and coordinated within the grade level curriculum and just in time within a lesson, within a section of learning or unit of study, and largely formative so that there's instructional action. You're going to make a teacher move based on whatever is being assessed in the moment. And it's not just to get a score and have it and mark a book, but to yield information about what the student can do in a content-specific way. All right. So these are thoughts for us to kind of keep in mind as we seek to prioritize. And I do want to address access because we know that access testing was interrupted this spring, and some students will have composite scores and some may have domain scores only, and they might not have a full composite, okay? And also you might be clamoring for when are we going to get access to the data, because it is still a valuable piece of information that you, as we discussed at the beginning, you really do rely on to set goals, okay? So if the students' materials were returned to DRC in the July 2nd wave, then the scores should be in AMS, and then they will be in CLIC by August 31st. If the students' materials were returned to DRC by August 17th, which is next week, those scores will be in AMS September 22nd, and the access scores will be in CLIC October 15th, okay? So that's just to level set so everyone's aware of that. And then I want to make a plug for the early access to EL Data Click app provided by OSSI for EL coordinators. If you are with DCPS and you are not familiar with this, that is something for you to reach out to your central office contact about to see if that is something that you should have access to or not. If you don't have access to it, you should be able to receive the data and from the app, potentially from central office. Within the app, there is numerous really valuable information, and I choose to highlight this because knowing that some access scores may be missing, just use everything that you have available. So that means looking back at historical access scores, historical PARCC and EL ELA and math scores, trying to get a sense of the student's trajectory as far back as is available. And we know that this depends on how long the student has been in school in DC, what grade the student is in. Obviously, the younger students have less history, of data that's available. But the message is to basically use everything that you possibly can to have a picture of where the student is. So again, I just think it's really helpful to consider students' growth over time. So even if you do have, let's say, some of the domain scores missing from this year, you can look at the previous scores and just try to get a sense of, overall, where was the student, what direction did they seem to be heading? And, as you develop scores for this year, my advice is to keep it simple and, just, aim for one level higher than the previous year, right, to set a goal. And I've seen you can break this out by domain, okay? And then I see a couple of questions in the chat box, so I want to address those before we go on. Did they score the test? Yes, so all materials that are sent back are being scored. Will we able to get scores for students transferring to our schools before 8/31? So it depends on when students' materials were returned. So if a student's materials were returned in the July 2nd window, then they would be available the 31st. Okay. Okay. All right, so let's keep going on, and we're going to dig into looking at some sample tools. I frame this as beginning of the year, during of the year, but certainly the tools that you have available at the beginning of the year and that you create or use, you will also rely on them during the year. So that's why I put EL goals and plan in the during the year section as well, so that's something that's very, alive. But we're going to look at four main things: EL goals and plan. And in breakout groups, you'll discuss the individual student sort of a template for organizing talking points to discuss goals with families and with teachers. And then we'll have an example of a progress report that reflects a language lens, and we will have a discussion, a real example from an LEA on content and language rubrics in use. Okay, and we'll have opportunities for discussion for all of these. And these are all just samples, starting points for you as you, adapt and develop tools that really make sense and are powerful for your own use. Okay, so this says from school report to can-do descriptor. So what you see here is copied from a sample access score report, which if you've seen these, you know that at the bottom they have broken out by proficiency level what the student's domain score was, and a summary of can-do descriptors. So students at this level generally can, and the objective here is to give families and teachers a sense of like, well, what does it mean to be a 2? And to do this from an assets-based perspective of what can the student do, not like what are the mistakes I see or what are the problems or something that's really kind of negative, and not recognizing the growth that students are making as they acquire English. And so it's trying to be concrete and give words to what a student can do and how that can be useful for an educator who seeks to then meet them where they are and set goals. Okay, so starting with the score report and the can-do descriptors. And then I'm showcasing here, this is an example from Center City LEA that Alicia Pasante, the EL program manager there kindly shared, just as one example. So I'm not advocating for any one thing per se. This is just one example that shows how to go from access scores to can-do descriptors. You're going to get a folder link, by the way, that's going to provide you access to these, and that also if people want to contribute, you're very welcome to do that, so people can kind of share and just see different examples. But what you see in the plan that's described here is, in a sense, just like very simple and straightforward. Okay, we have this broken out by language domain: listening, speaking, reading, writing. We have the levels written across, a sort of an excerpt of can-do descriptors for each level. It's specific to the grade band. And then a color coding of where is the student and what's the goal. And here the goal is one level up, right? That's where you're going to look ahead to, because we don't want to just focus on where is the student now and what do supports need to look like, but what are the can-dos for that next level. And then that's where your instructional strategies come into play of doing the work of helping that student to have both the support and the challenge to move them forward to the next level and beyond. Okay, so this is just a very, one way of doing this. That's an example that you may choose to adapt. Similarly, from the same LEA, this is just an example of what it might look like to give a progress update to families. And what you see here is that this is multilingual. The parent preferred language is Spanish, so we see that this is in English and Spanish. The goal for the level is put into the report so that it is essentially customized for the student and reflects the student's goals. So it's meeting the student where they are and where their goals are. And there is a system for marking, presumably using whatever coding your LEA uses to represent that can be marked and then tracked over time. Okay. And so having something like this is going to give you the chance to have in writing not only where the student is, but what are those goals. And that way you have something to use to guide instruction that you might give, or your teachers might give, or general education teachers who need to understand where students are and where they're going. Okay, so we're going to shift into breakout groups in a moment here. So let's prepare for that, okay? We want you to have the chance to talk with one another about how you're addressing language goals, what data you're going to be relying on, and how you frame those discussions, especially for this year. We are going to have, once you get into your groups, I'll just ask if you can please, quickly introduce yourselves and then dive right in so you can make the most of your time together. Choose a conversation starter or volunteer to be a conversation starter to lead off each question. We'll need a note taker for your group. You'll get a link so you can check it out, and a timekeeper. We'll have about 20 minutes in groups, so just try to keep pace, and just since it is limited time, just dive right in so that you can make the most of your time together. You're going to have a sample, and you're going to get to discuss it together and determine talking points for your group. And I'm going to have to put something into the chat box so that you can get to where you need to go. Again, I just want to kind of reinforce, and this is something you might, of course, do with your students if you need to scaffold them to be prepared to take on their roles and have the language to get started. This is just an example of how you might model that or provide an example to help people get going. And again, we have done this in previous sessions, but if you're not familiar, I want you to know that you're going to receive a Google document link in just a moment. And in that link, you'll be able to click to get to your breakout group. We're going to arrange those by last name. So there will be a group for A through C, last name A through C, last name D through L, last name M through R, last name S through Z. And hold on, before you go to your group, just be mindful that when you go to your group, the main room is going to appear as on hold, and you'll see this triangle. So what you'll do is when you're ready to come back to the group, click the triangle again. Don't click the hang up button, because you'll have to go back to your meeting request to kind of come back to the main group. So that's my kind of caveat for making sure you can get back to where we are at the beginning. And I'm going to share my screen. So if you want to come back to Teams, I will give you a little walkthrough of the Google document here in just a moment. So please sort of stay here. Don't head out to the breakout rooms just yet. Okay. All right. So here is the Google folder that everyone will have access to when you get the link, and you're going to go to one of the documents, the Google Doc for your group. You're going to open it, just like I am right now, and that's where you can get your link to go to your breakout group. And you're going to be discussing a document here on pages 2 and 3. Let me scroll. Okay, get this just so everyone can see the right spot here. So this is something that was created by WIDA, and it was done before distance learning began. And it was a template for having individual EL student data discussions with teachers and with families. So it goes over information to share, questions to ask teachers, questions to ask parents. And these are guiding questions for you to use in those conversations. And then there's a space to fill in for each student. What are the student's strengths? What's been observed in school about what the student can do in English and other languages? What do the test scores tell us? What are areas of focus according to what we've seen in school, test scores, and what I'm doing to support the student in these areas? And what are the family members planning to do? And then there's a space to enter information about access scores. The topic here is to use this to ground your conversation and looking at what must continue to be discussed with families and teachers when meeting about English learners' language proficiency growth and goals. How are you using this information to develop these goals? And then how must the conversation change due to distance learning? Is there something that you might change about this template to reflect the current scenario? And I'm going to say, focus on language development here. We know that there are like numerous social-emotional focus areas right now. But for here, let's focus in and really hone in on the language proficiency piece. And then also want to put out the opportunity for people, if they would like to share, how does your goals template look, and just have the opportunity to do that together. So let's make sure you all have this link in your chat box, and please go ahead to your breakout group so that you can access them. Let me just drop this link. I think it may already be there, but in case you didn't get the link, there you go. So please go to your Google Drive, click on the breakout, the paper for your last name group, join your group, and we'll come back in 20 minutes. So that will be 11, let's say 11:03. We'll come back. If you are in last name A to C, you don't actually have to change groups. You can stay right here in the main room. Okay. And for those who are in the main room, I'm going to go on mute. I'm going to step back, and it's going to be leave it to you all to start introducing yourselves and take it away. So I will step back.
Hello, how you doing?
Good morning, how are you?
Pretty good.
Who else is
I don't know. I think it might just be us.
people in this group?
No, I'm here, but I don't know how to turn my camera on.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, how are you?
This is a new way for me, so
I know.
I'm completely zoomed out.
I'm also in here, but I'm a sped teacher who supports ELL teachers too. So Anika know like I'm sitting in for most of the sessions.
Why won't they let me turn on this camera?
My name is Dalia Aguilar, and I'm work at Mundo Verde Bilingual Public Charter School. And I work in leadership, kind of holding space for ELL coordination as we're a dual immersion school.
Hi, everybody. My name's Erin Bailey. I'm at the Inspired Teaching Demonstration School, and my title there is the Literacy and English Learner Specialist. So I do direct instruction with ELs.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Norma Bryant. I am the EL specialist at Friendship Armstrong. And I support pre-K through 8th grade.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rachel Cheney. I'm the EL program manager at Meridian Public Charter School. We're pre-K through 8th grade.
Good morning. I'm the one who said I'm a special ed teacher who helps kids who are also ELs. Lisa Warwick.
Good morning. My name is Ankhil, and I am a GED teacher at the Next Step Public Charter School. Work with adults 16 through 30.
I don't know about y'all, but it's hard for me to tell how many people are in the group that we're in.
Yeah, I can only see 3 people on my screen.
And it says 22, but I don't think there's 22 in this group. I think that's the larger group, right?
I think so.
Is there anybody else who hasn't introduced themselves yet? Okay. Good to meet everybody. I get my eyes on the document. Something seems to be wrong with my reception here, but we're supposed to read the sample organizer that is in each of the links, and then have a discussion. So 5 minutes to read that, and then discuss the questions that are in that document. So we're thinking about what must continue to be discussed with families and teachers when meeting about EL goals. How must the conversation change due to distance learning? What does your EL goals template or plan look like? And if you do not have one, how can you use or adapt the sample provided? So with that, I can set a timer for us to read the document for 5 minutes. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Hi, this is Jen. How's everybody doing here in this group?
Good. We have one more minute to read the article.
Okay,
and
great.
Then we need to
okay, yeah,
roles.
Good idea to, I think, maybe don't spend a lot of time on roles, but dive into the conversation so that you can make the most of the few minutes you have. Okay?
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
That was our 5 minutes. Does somebody want to take notes for the group? I can take notes if somebody wants to keep time.
I can keep the time. How much time is it?
We need 15 minutes for the discussion of the questions. And then we'll need, yeah, just 15 minutes.
Okay, so I'll set a timer now.
The first question is, what must continue to be discussed with families and teachers when meeting about ELs, language, proficiency, growth, and goals?
Hey, this is Rachel. I think as far as discussions with families, definitely continuing to converse with them about what they can do at home to support the native language, and trying to mitigate any pressure they might feel about having to make up for like lost time learning English, and making sure that they're aware that, you know, that their strength lies in their ability to continue teaching their children their language.
Yeah, and just kind of to piggyback off of that, I think that we need to emphasize not just English language learning, but, you know, literacy all around. I think that one of the things that we see with our population is that many of them come from very low literacy background, and that will actually impede their learning in the long run. So even if they're just reading in their native language, you know, that's fine. But just really to promote general literacy is important.
You can come back to that one, I guess, if there are more ideas about it. The next question is, how does the conversation change due to distance learning?
I think this ties back to the previous question, but as far as conversations with general education teachers, making sure that they're aware of like the developmental nature of language acquisition, and what types of scaffolds and strategies are appropriate for students at different proficiency levels. And I think the virtual aspect is definitely something that will change that conversation during during distance learning. How are we going to embed more visuals? How are we going to create opportunities for interaction? So making sure that like we're really specific and like targeted about what types of supports we could provide for ELs in a virtual setting.
I think we're all on the same document, so if I missed something, let me know. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I can't even tell if you all can hear me. But this is Norma. I certainly agree with what Rachel was saying. I have been participating in PDs for this is second week. And our school has adopted wit and wisdom. And so with me being the only L teacher that's spread across the school, I don't see a lot of vocabulary work, visuals in their work as they're planning these lessons. And it wasn't that great within this school. So having it virtually is going to be a challenge. So I know my work is cut out for me in a way to support all of them with making sure they have as many visuals as possible and many examples of the vocabulary word, what it means in their native language, how you spell it, how you write it, those sorts of things. So I think those are some things that could get better moving.
Okay, we're gonna come back to the main room in about 2 minutes.
Thank you. So the last two questions, we'll answer them both, I guess. What does your EL goals template or plan look like? And if you do not have one, how can you use or adapt the example provided? We don't have a template that we use. And because it's so integrated, I think I will use this one. We've planned welcoming meetings with families when we return. And in that, we were trying to get a sense of what has been their, what was their engagement according to the families and with academics in general in the spring, and to give us a sense of how we want to begin to support students and families at the beginning of the year. And it seems kind of long to do the whole thing, but it feels like you could borrow some of these questions. If you know that the student is an EL, you might be able to then say, okay, I'm going to ask some of these questions to the families about language in that welcoming meeting. Maybe not as technical as do you have questions about the access scores, but at least just in general, like, tell me about how language is used outside of school, and so on. And then maybe save the access information for when we do have more up-to-date access scores for later engagement at parent-teacher conferences. So just thinking about how to integrate this with some other initiatives we have.
So there's a form, I think, that every family gets, especially if they're new families. It's the language access form.
Right.
Maybe just having that available so you can cut some time off your slide, having to fill that out.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea. Let me see. I lost place in the notes. Anything else about how we might adapt the sample or use it?
I really appreciated that they gave us the sample, and I think what I'm going to do is adapt it to make it similar to our student support team SST template. That way it's easier for teachers. They're already familiar with the SST goal template. It would just be like another version of that.
All right. I don't know. We have to go back, right? They don't pull us back in. Is that correct?
Yes, and we're in the main room, so we just
Okay,
yeah.
we're good. If anything else occurs, let me know and I can add it to our notes. Thanks for sharing, everybody.
Thank you for being a strong leader of the group.
Oh, thank you.
All right, hi everybody. I think people are starting to all kind of come back to the main room. Thank you for serving as the main hub. I know it's hard to see who all is there.
It is.
But I'm glad you're able to dig in and have a good conversation. Okay, I'm just going to kind of check that we've got everybody, and I'll be right back. Okay. All right. So I think everyone is back or on their way back. And it was great to hear the awesome conversations happening. Just like really thoughtful about how you're going to address your students' needs and what's best to talk about with families when, how to use the information you have really thoughtfully and not over rely on, scores, but also try to assess at the beginning of the year to understand where students are and what students need. And then I heard great ideas on how the template might be adapted to kind of fit other templates at your school that people are used to, but with this language piece that might not be already present in your school system. So it was great to hear those good ideas about what works about this, what doesn't, what you might adapt for your grade band. And again, you'll have this available so you can, download it, make a copy, and see how it can be useful to you. And now what we're going to do is shift to Nearpod. So hopefully you still have that link active so you can go back to viewing there. But I'm going to put it into the chat box in case you need to click it again. There we go. Hopefully I will see you there. Are you able to see the Nearpod?
It's asking for a name. Oh, okay. I guess I just put my own in.
Yes. You can just put your name. Yep. Okay. If you have any issue, just let us know. Okay. We're kind of back to this picture of the instruction and assessment cycle. So we've kind of looked at this idea of setting goals and how to communicate about that. We've looked at a couple of examples of what that might look like. And then for the assess piece, I'm really excited to be able to have someone here who can really bring an example to life. And, just to kind of get us into the zone of thinking about how we can assess the 4 domains like embedded within our learning activities related to content and language objectives, related to, I heard someone in a group saying, no, what is it that students really need to know? What are we focusing on and how can we be oriented towards that. And so just thinking about in day-to-day, you know, assessing, listening, you've got the oral input, and then using technology to mark, move, select, some way of demonstrating comprehension. Doing an action such as highlighting text, which now we can do electronically, to demonstrate, you know, something from the reading domain. Using Flipgrid, for example, to have students have the opportunity to take a stance. And then all of these can be considered pieces of data to be assessed using the WIDA rubric to frame that work, and then mapping it back against the student's goals. So, you know, in the example we're going to look at, we're going to focus on the writing domain. Okay, and in this example here, just one idea would be to kind of integrate speaking and writing. So if a student is going to provide a speaking response through Flipgrid, that can be a starting point for then building off what you were, the student was talking about, to then produce writing. Okay, so I'm very, very pleased to introduce Bobby Vertigal from DCPS Cardozo Education Campus, who is going to talk about how content and language rubrics have been used at her school to assess writing. I'll do the clicking, but Bobby, I will turn it over to you right now. And just thank you so much for being here and sharing your work with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm the instructional coach over ELs Education at Cardozo, and what I'm going to share with you today, it's really taken a lot of different forms over the years. So I want to kind of highlight the fact that, you know, you have different principals, you have different APs, you have different team structures. So I'm going to try to share with you today the best practices that we've kind of gathered from using this tool in lots of different ways over the years. And the origin of this tool is, so all the teachers were given a PARCC scoring rubric to score writing samples. And we looked at our very large portion of ELs students and really felt like this was not an accurate tool to gauge where our students were. They were just always landing on level 1. It wasn't really telling us too much. And so we decided to take this PARCC rubric and turn it into something that we felt like would really give us valuable data for our ELs students. So if you want to go to the next slide. So of course, we're going to lean on WIDA in order to do that. That's such an important tool in all of our toolboxes. And so we looked at really there's two main domains in PARCC that are two areas of criteria in the PARCC rubric. And then we looked at the WIDA rubric, who had an additional 3 criteria area for writing. I don't expect you to be able to read these right now. This is just to show an example of where we pulled them from. And so what we did was we took the 2 criteria for PARCC, the 3 criteria for WIDA, and we combined them. And if you want to go to the next slide. And we created this, what we call the Cardozo Adapted PARCC WIDA Writing Rubric. And this was used in a little bit of background about Cardozo. We have more of a sheltered instruction model. We're an international academy. And so our students acquire content and language integrated in the same class. So you're a science L teacher, a social studies L teacher. And so we had all of our teachers use this rubric to evaluate a student's writing. And we found that it was much more accurate in predicting where the students were, because maybe those 2 PARCC criteria, what we could, you know, this was where the student was struggling, but we could really highlight the student's strength in their language composition, in their vocabulary usage, in the complexity of the sentences they're constructing. So it just really gave us a much more valuable data tool than what was being kind of rolled out for the rest of the school. So a copy of this rubric is in that resource folder that's shared with everyone. So please feel free to take a look at this at a rubric at a little bit closer level, so you could see the different levels and the different criteria. It's a little small here for you to read, but we also designed it to be student facing. You see the little smiley faces along the top. So the idea is the student turns in a writing sample, the teacher evaluates it with this rubric, and this rubric is returned to the student so they can see where their strengths and areas of growth lie. So it's both a data collection tool as well as a feedback tool for the students. If you want to go to the next slide. So again, just historically, we've used this rubric in different ways, different years, and I just want to share with you what some of the successes that we found. So a couple of years ago, we had a school-wide writing initiative where we wanted the students to practice writing more, specifically to prepare them for a lot of these state tests that are coming. And so we decided that each content area would administer a writing prompt once per month. We would alternate the weeks that happened so that students were actually practicing writing once per week. So, week 1 would be science, week 2, social studies, week 3, ELA, week 4, math. So the great thing about that schedule was teachers didn't feel like they were having to disrupt their scope and sequence too much, because it was only once a month for their individual class, but the students were getting really a weekly data point on how their writing was progressing. So we had a shared Excel sheet for each student had a line, and every teacher could go in there and track what was that student's writing score for that month. But ultimately, we had a weekly check-in on the progress of that student's writing growth. One of the other things that we did that was really successful was that with this rubric was we collected student writing samples early on, like one of our first meetings all together as a team, and we normed with the rubric. So we made multiple copies of the same writing sample, broke teachers into smaller groups, had them initially individually assess and give it a score, and then they would bring it to their small group and discuss and kind of norm on what they felt like an appropriate score would. And we'd come back together as the whole group and kind of see where everyone landed and really have very engaging conversations to make sure everyone was on the same page and we were all interpreting the rubric the same way. Very important if you're sharing data, right? If it was just me in my class and I was only looking at writing samples that I was collecting, obviously I'm normed with myself. But I definitely encourage you that if this is going to be happening across multiple teachers, please make sure you take the time to norm with the rubric to really increase your usefulness of the data you're collecting. And we mostly use this rubric in response to a park style writing prompt. So the students would have 2 articles that they would read, and at the end of the articles there would be a park style prompt that they would respond in essay format. But you can also use this for a single paragraph. You can use it in less formalized writing. It doesn't only have to be used for essays. And if you're wondering, like, where do I find these park style writing prompts and things, we very strongly leaned on the resources of, okay, everyone says this 2 different ways, right? There's 2 camps. Is it News ELA or News Ella? But that's a great tool if you're not familiar with it, where you can pull articles at different lexile levels so that you're really able to adjust the writing prompt, adjust the reading levels, the lexile levels for the needs of our ELs students. And additionally, ReadWorks is another great resource. These are free resources. Of course, there's like paid memberships if you want to be able to do more, but there is a basic free membership, and both of these allow you to search by lexile level to make sure that you're finding readings that are appropriate for your students. So that was my spiel. That was kind of the overview. Again, I definitely encourage you all to take the rubric and make it your own. By no means am I presenting this as like the perfect, like finalized. We're still changing it. And as we all know, WIDA is releasing updated standards this year. So this might have to change a little bit once we get an idea of what those are going to look like. But at this point, I'll turn it over to questions, comments, anything you'd like to know.
Thank you so much, Bobby, for sharing that. It was awesome to just hear this example of how teachers were collaborating regularly, embedding assessment in an ongoing way into instruction and conversations about student progress. And then at the same time, having those conversations to build teachers' understanding of the WIDA proficiency levels and what that looks like in the domain of writing. So just thank you for sharing. And I hope that this sparked, thoughts from everyone in the group. And, I'd love to open up now for questions and comments. If there's something that you would love to hear more about from Bobby, or just how do you think you might apply this? How does this spark something for your own work so that everyone can kind of brainstorm and learn from one another together? So feel free to use the hand raise button or take yourself off mute and jump in. We'll keep an eye here on the hand raises if anyone wants to go for it. Go for it. Rachel, did you do a hand raise there?
I did not, but I do have a question. Yeah, Bobby, thank you so much for sharing. That was really helpful to see how you were able to integrate, a content rubric with a language rubric. I guess my question is, in terms of like the implementation and like feasibility of this, like one thing my team and I have gone back and forth on is, we have pretty large caseloads and our students are like dispersed all over the place. So trying to use rubrics are just so much more time consuming than like some other, like, a checklist or other types of assessment tools. So can you just talk about how you found the best way to implement this so that it is efficient?
Yeah, so I was in just a very lucky circumstance that I've actually been using the platform Canvas for years, which is the platform that DCPS is going to be using for the distance learning. And within Canvas, they have a tool called SpeedGrader, and you can actually upload your custom rubrics into SpeedGrader, and it's literally, you just click the boxes and it generates the score for the student. So if you're not using Canvas as your platform, it would be interesting to explore what other online tools are there where you can actually digitalize this rubric, and it's just literally a simple click, 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 click. This is how they're doing in the various areas. I feel like, again, talking about how you can kind of adapt this to work for you. Maybe it's this language in the rubric can be turned into a checklist or can be sort of modified, but I found digitalizing, is that the word? The rubric into Canvas saved me a lot of time. So for those of you who are using that as a platform, that's one option. I think the bigger focus is just looking at maybe a writing rubric that your school is already being asked to use, that your teachers are already being required to use, and how can you take that rubric and add on these elements of WIDA? It could require some additional retraining of teachers to identify those elements, but say a teacher has 24 students, 4 of them are identified as ELs, could that teacher use this modified rubric or whatever tool you have for those 4 students as she's going through and evaluating writing, and then that's data that's shared and passed back to you? Those are just a couple ideas.
Thank you. Howard, you have your hand raised if you'd like to go ahead.
But the question was answered. I wanted to know, can we integrate Mozilla and ReadWorks into Canvas and Microsoft Teams? And I'm happy to hear that we can. I just have to learn how to do it.
Great, great. Okay.
And that was my question when you said digitize. Did you just type in the information for your rubrics, or are you uploading it? Or yeah.
You have to type it in, so it can be a little bit time consuming, but then once it's in, you can share it. Within Canvas, you can search by organization for rubrics that have already been created. So if the person creating it, designates it as available to my organization, then anyone can come in and use that already made rubric. So it's not that everyone needs to enter it individually, but it might be a little that one-time time consuming of initially putting it on there and then just making sure it's set up in a way that can be shared. I can go back in. When I switched from a classroom teacher to an instructional coach, I don't know if it archived my Canvas courses or not, but I can go in to see if I can find my old courses and somehow turn this exact rubric has already been uploaded into Canvas. See if there's a way that I can somehow put it back into the world of Canvas as a resource that can be shared.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone have any, we could take one more comment, question, idea.
My other question, and that's to anybody out there, because as I said before, I'm a special education teacher, but I do have students and I see even younger students. Now, like I have, a couple of students who are trilingual, whatever. Is anybody else out there or had experience with, or even focus on that or zoom in on it with kids who are SPED, but also ELs students? Like this is part of my passion that I'm focusing on now. Maybe not. Okay.
Yeah, no, at Cardozo, I mean, we have about 53% of our student population is ELs, and I want to say within that, we have like 80 students that are like co-classified as L and SPED. We have a very large portion. So I work really closely with our director of special education, and basically we're trying to kind of reframe resources that are useful as resources for specialized populations, because we know that scaffolding tools and differentiation and a lot of the tools that our L learners need also are best practices for our SPED students, or even for our students that may be behind on reading levels or have interrupted education. So I think it's kind of thinking about what tools hit both buckets, right? What tools are really going to make the material more accessible to any student who might be struggling with the information. Yeah, it's definitely a unique circumstance to be in, and I don't think, from what I've seen, there's not necessarily different tools for ELs and different tools for SPED. In the Venn diagram, the middle section is huge for those tools that work really well to support both populations.
I totally agree with you, and that was my point. The more I was trying to come over to the side of just starting to see what ELs and reading struggling and looking at dyslexia and doing a lot of that this summer, I'm like, oh, you know what? It kind of all meshes together, and it's when I look at the whole child, I'm looking at the whole child, and so I'm starting trying to do the ground level, the foundation where the kids are younger at this, to see like you're the other end of high school and the lower end. So maybe I'll connect with you, but I totally agree with you. It's just something that's we need to just keep our lenses and eyes on and make it where we are working smarter for the child and the whole child instead of harder and looking at the child in pieces of a puzzle, which looking at the whole child and the families. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh,
I'm sorry.
Thank you both so much. I think that's just a great point to bring in that important piece, and the importance of looking at the child as a whole child. Just to move to closing, you can peek back at the Nearpod link now. Got a question here for exit ticket. If you can just think to yourself, based on this session, what are your next steps or takeaways for preparing for the school year? And what new questions do you have as a result of today's session? And you're going to see a board here for you to share your thoughts and post that up so others can see as well. So please take a moment to answer or share your thoughts. So you just have to enter the text, click post, and then everyone will start to see. Great, wonderful to see these thoughtful reflections and next steps on refining data collection cycles, integrating EL assessment questions into plans. Yep, still wondering what is this really going to look like for all of our students, thinking about the students' perspective, digitizing rubrics, adapting templates, team coordination. They're all really exciting. Using a combination Park-WIDA rubric, this is great. Proactively working with parents. Thank you so much for being willing to share your reflections and next steps. And just know that everything that you add, like your peers and colleagues here are taking that away as well, and that your thoughts are helping everyone to kind of grow in the deepness of supports to help English learners succeed and to make this year the best that it really possibly can. Great. So we're at the end of our time. It's now 11:30. You're going to receive a follow-up email from me, which is going to contain a lot of resources that we have looked at today, as well as additional resources for you as you do your planning, and some announcements about professional development opportunities. And then you're also separately going to get an email from notify@quickbase.com. So please don't ignore that email. That's the survey for you to complete. And so we really want to hear your feedback on this session in particular, and in the future, what would you like to see? What are your burning questions or topics you want us to address? And we really do take it to heart, and we'll do our best to reflect that going forward. And then that is also the way to get the PLUs. So I thank you all for your time today, and you're just staying solutions oriented and really trying to work on what needs to be done to best understand where students are and setting goals to meet them where they are and challenge them forward. So this will be the end of the session, and I will stay on for a few more minutes if anyone wants to continue to ask any questions for a couple of minutes. But I thank you, and this is the end of the session for today.